Welcome, educators! The following video is a session from the Science News Learning, formerly Science News in High School's webinar series. This program provides the Society for Science's award-winning journalism and standards-aligned lesson plans to public middle and high schools for free to support educators in building engaging, real-world science curricula that bring alive core concepts with the most recent advancements in STEM. The Society for Science is a nonprofit membership organization dedicated to expanding scientific literacy, effective STEM education, and scientific research. If you'd like to reach out to any of the presenters or learn more about the resources discussed, please contact snlearning@societyforscience.org.
Thank you for joining us here tonight. We know just how valuable your time is every year as a teacher and know that you have less of it probably this year. So thanks again. Our hope really is that you walk away from this session with new ideas and inspiration that you can immediately start implementing into your classes as early as this week or next. I am Anna Rhymes. I manage the Science News in High Schools program. And prior to joining the Society about 4.5 years ago, I was a high school science teacher in Washington, D.C. for 10 years. And I am joined tonight by my partner in crime, Brianna Van Dyne, who is here and will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Raina Van Dyne. I'm the Associate Specialist on the Science News in High Schools program. I've been here for 2 years, excuse me, and before that, I was a middle school librarian in Wisconsin.
All right, and so just starting out here with the presenters today and also in April. So we're really excited that we're going to hear from 3 educators today, Karisa, Brianna, and Edwina, and they'll be talking about how they have integrated the Science News in High Schools resources into their classes and into their research programs. You can see that on April 15th, we'll be joined by 3 more educators. And if you'd like to go ahead and sign up for that session, we'd love for you to do so right now so we can get the link to you. And Raina will put that link, in the chat. The other quick note, kind of housekeeping's sake, is if you wouldn't mind, just for the presentation portion of the session, we'd appreciate if you would turn off your videos actually, because we'd love to get this video posted up on our website for additional educators to view. Okay, so Raina and I are going to start off doing just a very, very brief overview of some of the program goals and resources so that you'll know where to access the resources that the educators are talking about tonight. And so starting out, just the goal of the Science News in High Schools program is really to boost STEM literacy for high school students. It's one of the Society's equity and outreach programs. And we are attempting to do this boosting of STEM literacy really through you all. We're trying to encourage you and help you integrate science news journalism into your regular classroom curricula. And the idea there is so that students tie what they're learning in the classroom, basic science concepts, to the current news and to phenomena in the world around them. So not just the broad world, but also their local communities as well.
And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see a list of program resources. So the program includes 10 copies of Science News, each issue of Science News during the school year. You also have access to the Science News and Science News for Students online archive. And you can find online articles for Science News at sciencenews.org. Those are written for the general public and have readability scores of grades 9 and up. And then Science News for Students articles can be found at sciencenewsforstudents.org. And those have readability scores of grades 5 and up. So you have 2 differentiated reading levels there. You also have access to an Edmodo group with other SNHS educators, where we post extra content or opportunities from the Society, or you can also just talk to each other about best practices of using the resources. We also send a weekly newsletter on Friday mornings that links to our latest educator guide and other educator materials that we send out, and also other opportunities from the Society. And then finally, you have access to our digital educator guide library full of interdisciplinary lesson plans, each one of which is paired to a Science News article. And Anna will talk more about those in the next slide.
All right. So yes, did you know that we had these educator resources? Is always the first question that we like to ask. So we do create next generation science standard aligned lesson plans, essentially, that tie to a specific science news article. And generally those articles are from the latest or most current science news issue. And what we're doing is we're essentially highlighting the core curricular concepts that are covered in the article. And we're also trying to identify the cross-curricular nature of the research that's being covered. The types of lesson plans that we're creating, as you see here on the right-hand side, are comprehension questions. We are also creating discussion prompts, and we are creating hands-on, hopefully hands-on soon for everyone, activities that are paired again to these articles. You can find these lesson plans in our digital library of lesson plans, and that's located at www.sciencenews.org/SNHS. You can do a keyword search in that digital library, and you can also use those newsletters that Raina was talking about that essentially aggregate STEM-related content for you and are sent out to you weekly. So all of the presenters today will be sharing specific examples of resources that they have used to help their students learn in their own classes. And so we're hoping that either you can take away one of their specific lesson plans or you are inspired to actually do some digging in these archives, either the articles or the lesson plans that are associated with them. All right, Karisa, go ahead and take it over.
I'm very excited to be able to share how I use science news. I've been very fortunate to have the issues coming to my classroom weekly for a few years now. And I'm going to try to go through lots of different ways that I use them. So I'm going to talk fast because I want to share as much as I can. But again, if you've got questions, feel free to ask me, towards the ends of all the presentations. So basically just a little quick blurb. It seems like that's the trend these days in all of these Zoom meetings. So I have a biology degree, a master's in biology. I teach lots of different levels of biology. I actually joke that I teach for 3 different schools because I teach for Joplin High School and have so for 19 years. But I'm an adjunct professor for a local college. And then I also teach for Upward Bound, which is actually housed at a different college campus. So I try to stay involved, I guess, in all the different places. But this is where I call home. I spend sometimes, it feels like, more time here than I do at home. But this is our new Joplin High School building. The reason I mention this is back in 2011, our high school was taken out by a EF5 tornado. And as we rebuilt after that, we were also told as a faculty, hey, everybody, we're going to go one-to-one with computers. And also, we're not replacing any textbooks. So good luck, work on your curriculum and basically kind of figure it out. We had more support than that, but that's kind of what it felt like in the midst of also not knowing where you were teaching and so on. So science news was not something I had current issues of at that exact time, but I got it very quickly afterwards. And I have very much used it as a really essential resource. So again, I teach all the different levels of biology here at Joplin, but I also teach the science research course, and that's kind of where we're going to start out in how science news has really impacted my classroom. Speaking of classroom, this is what mine looks like. Lots of color, lots of pictures. I'm setting in my lab actually right now. They joke it's one of the more decorated ones, but why I think I need to mention that is the fact that science news helps me get a lot of these different infographics and pictures and other things that I can put into my PowerPoint so that they can be just as colorful and informative as well. So how in the world do I actually use this particular resource? So the first one's very basic. I keep them and I let students read off of them. So at the end of the day, in the class, maybe they've taken a quiz, they've got all their work cut up. They're not supposed to sit there and just play on their phones. So I've got a stack of these at the front of the room. It's usually the current year's worth so that they can kind of go through, and I try to keep them fanned out as much as I can so that they can see some of the different topics. This particular issue had a lot to do with gaming. And so some of my, maybe not so much what they think science kids were, very interested in that particular article. I also keep a whole bunch at the back of the room. So I kind of have a cumulative library, and I do that for a couple of different reasons. One, it's my stash, so that I can go through and, oh yeah, I had this particular article and so on. But one of the big things that tornado taught me is digitize everything. So I go through and I try to scan as much as I can. You know, pictures now with iPhones, your phone can be a scanner as well. If you weren't aware of that, it's a fairly new thing that I figured out, and I'm happy to at the end explain how to do that. But the other reason is I do teach that science research class, and so sometimes they want to see some of those other issues that maybe didn't just come from this current year. So that's kind of the starting spot for the research kids. So this is kind of like the second way I use science news in the classroom. They come in August, despite me talking to a lot of them in May, you know, the potential research team candidates. Hey, start thinking about what you want to do over the summer. Inevitably they don't, because it's summer. And so in they walk in August, and it's like, okay, we have to have this project wrapped up in February, and we need to figure out what you're going to do with it. So they use these science news articles, number one, to just kind of browse and get ideas of what the latest, greatest research is. And then they can also use it as a way to familiarize themselves with science writing, because science writing is different than English writing. You know, we tend to kind of get cut and dry, try to get some of the flowery language out and so on. And so even though they maybe don't find anything in that particular issue that's going to help them with their research project, it's still showing them how to present data, how to present their thoughts in the written form, and you know, hopefully come up with some ideas. So a lot of times we go from that stack of magazines at the front, maybe hopefully they find an article that kind of interests them. So this is one particular example. I had a young man in my research class, very interested in chemistry. His parents joked he wanted a molecular set for Christmas so he could build molecules and so on. Very much the chemistry kid. And he found this article and thought it was interesting about using algae as biofuel. Conducted a research project similar, you know, along that path. As you do with research, you find out there's hiccups and there's things that don't go quite as smoothly as you expect. So the biofuel aspect didn't necessarily come out of this project like he had hoped. He looked more at just, you know, like nitrate concentrations and how that impacted the growth of the algae and so on. I mentioned this particular young man really just because he is somebody who is still continuing in the world of science. He is a chemistry and biology double major. And when I talked to him about using this, you know, his story in the presentation, he said, well, he said, just so you know, the math department really wants me to be a triple major, but I just don't think I can handle that much. And I was like, oh my goodness. But he's continued on in the realm of science. So, you know, we've gone from that little science news article with a kid that was very science minded. Now, I fully disclose that he walked in loving science into my classroom, and he's still very much continuing on. So those magazines are going to definitely help those kids that are already interested in science. I had another young lady that somebody in the family had Alzheimer's, and so she was interested in that, and so found some of the different science news articles about Alzheimer's, and looking at, you know, some of the different treatment. She continued on and actually did compete at ISEF in Los Angeles, and again, kind of continued on the path of researching Alzheimer's. Also a very science-minded kid. She's actually currently in medical school. With her project, you know, I let all my current research students always look at the past research projects, and we kind of have the story, you know, we have the talk at the beginning of the year that, you know, these kids were just as lost as you were. They didn't know what to do. Take some of these magazines home, start trying to figure out what you want to do. And, you know, continuing on and succeeded and competed at different competitions and did well at different places. And then I like to show them that, look, this is a 2019 article. This was after she graduated, but research can still be found linking to some of these past research projects. So research isn't over. So even though maybe a topic's been covered, we can find examples of where it's going now in the world of science. And a lot of times we do use those science news articles to kind of find that. As stated earlier, they're pretty easy for a high schooler to read. I do have some lower level kids that sometimes struggle. And I'll kind of get into some of that towards the end. Sometimes it's just kind of a random article. This one kind of caught an eye of one of my research kids. I've had a lot of microbiology projects. A lot of times we're looking at the world of bacteria. I've had some students look at fungus. So again, we don't have like a microbiology class here at Joplin. And so this lets those kids that are interested in those things kind of explore those. I have one student that has actually participated in research for 3 different years, 3 totally different projects. He started out with the microbiology route, worked with mice, seemed to enjoy working with mice. Came back the next year and said, hey, you know what, I think I want to work with mice again, but I don't want to do what I did last time. I'm not going to continue that. I'm going to do something different. And from having worked with mice, of course, he had read several different articles about how, in a lab, a lot of times mice are contained by themselves versus a group setting. And so this article kind of went along with kind of intriguing him on what his next project would be. And so he tested stress hormones with an assay kit with some lab mice again. He came back another year, didn't want to deal with mice anymore. I think 2 years was enough. And then actually went in a completely different route with soil testing. So, again, kind of tying it back, it started with an article, and then we wound up being able to, he wound up being able to complete a nice project over it. With that, again, I can show my current research kids that, hey, here's some of these projects and here's some later research. So again, showing how the research is just continuing on, and how they could have a similar project to something that's been done here before, but they can tweak it and change it or maybe update it, and so on. Sometimes my research kids find articles like this one that they were really, really interested in, and they're like, yeah, let's do this. I want to have a whole bunch of tanks of jellyfish, and I want to see how they sleep, and I want to test that because that article just came out and it was really cool. And we talked about jellyfish and advanced biomes where I want to do this. And then it was well, hang on, we're in Southwest Missouri, and how are we going to house these? And we'd even checked into tanks and stuff, but the concern came, what about safety for the researcher and so on. So unfortunately, that project got scrapped, but it was still a nice discussion that we had. And she went on and actually did a completely different project dealing with microbiology. With micro, again, probably at least in the high school setting, I tend to have several micro projects just because it's a little bit easier. There's also all kinds of micros articles in Science News that maybe help kind of show kids, hey, this is still a big area of research. Gut bacteria, the good bacteria, the bad bacteria, lots of different research can be done. And again, a lot of times will tie back into Science News articles that I found, or not I found, sorry, my students have found. Currently, I have a young lady. She just finished this particular project, but she was a research student last year, wanted to do something completely different. And so she's working on microplastics. That's kind of a big thing right now, of course, is how much plastic pollution there is in the world. And so this article, she had kind of read, and she said, well, what about water? And so then we started talking about all the plastics you hear about in the ocean. And again, being in Southwest Missouri, we can't access that really easy. And so she actually started looking at freshwater sources and looking at microplastics here in our area. Just completed the project. She did kind of partner a little bit with our local university, but she did all of her own background research, and some of it was based out of Science News articles. And then, of course, she went much further into peer-reviewed journals, but it was a good starting spot for her, getting that idea going for her particular project. Speaking of that local university, my kids think this is really cool. It seems like if you know somebody that they deems famous, it's kind of a like street cred, if you will. So this particular article, when I found it back in 2017, I showed it to the research kids, and I said, hey, you've met this guy, by the way. This is a local professor. He's the snake guy, because we were able to tour the science labs out at Missouri Southern. And so even though I've not had anybody deal with snakes in their science research project, thank goodness, I think, because I don't really want to house them in my lab, but I could send them, I guess, out to him. They thought it was really cool that here's a publication we get every week, and we take time and we try to look at it. And oh my gosh, I know that guy. So that was really kind of fun to tie that into it. As I said, the science research class, we do kind of base it off of ISEF and trying to get kids to that International Science and Engineering Fair. And I use science news articles. They use science news articles to kind of figure out their projects, but I can also use some of the different science news articles to say, hey, this is a big deal. Like, you really want to try to get to that ISEF convention, because it is so many countries, and it's articles like this that really kind of help me show that it's not just me talking. It is a really, really big deal. This particular student, why I mention this is that science news is not just for science students. Very much a computer science guy. If you can understand the stuff that's written on that dry erase board, kudos, because I still don't. And he was a research kid with me for a year. But there are lots of different articles in these science news magazines that can tie into computer science, and can tie into history, and can tie into some of those different interests. So again, I mentioned earlier that a lot of these articles help those science-minded kids, but I can get non-science minded kids to do well, and really taking the research and the competition out of it, just to have something interesting to read and to look at. I've been very fortunate that in our area that I've been able to have quite a few different kids make it to that International Science Fair. And a lot of it has to do with trying to figure out what they want to do with those projects, and getting it back into really tying it back into some science news articles that kind of helped get them along that idea as far as what they wanted to do. This was a nice little graphic. I do try to show them and say, hey, again, science fair is a big deal. Look at this. Look at how many countries are involved. So what I do like about the science news magazine is that sometimes it's more the graphics, some of the different pictures that I can use, especially if it is a case where I've got some lower level reading students. But graphics like this, it's pretty clear cut and dry, and it's a good way to advertise it. And again, it's not always the science kids that use it. This kid straight out told me, hey, I'm not a science kid. I'm like, you've taken science research for 3 years. He's like, yeah, I'm still not a science kid. But he liked being able to explore what he wanted to do. And he's actually history and political science focused in his freshman year of college. Other ways that I use science news is really just enhancing things that I already teach, or finding out new things that I want to teach. So this is kind of a stack. My poor husband deals with magazines and stuff, being at home from time to time. I read through them, I tag them, I'm like, ooh, I could use this for this. Ooh, I could use this for this. I think I have a Tupperware tote right now in my backseat of my car with some of these, but I use them not just to enhance my curriculum, but really it helps me keep up to date. I'm a very science-minded person, so I can kind of see what some of the different articles are. There's a lot I don't understand because I'm not a physics person or computer engineering or anything like that, but I do enjoy them. So generally speaking, this is just kind of a little quick list of 5 ways that I use the articles. There's lots of other ways. If I've got 5 minutes at the end of the hour, and we're very much kind of trained to teach bell to bell, you can use some of these articles. I have a whole folder of these where I've got them already scanned. So then if I have that extra time, I can just pick one and put it up on the screen behind me. We can have a quick discussion about it. Or sometimes I do that as students walk in. Hey, here's your bell work for today. It's not like a normal bell work question. I want you to read this little paragraph and then answer this question, or we're going to have a discussion about it, or something to that effect. So very quick reading, writing assignments, giving examples of different things that I already teach. Sometimes those kids want to take those magazines home and read even further. I might only give them a page or a paragraph of the article, but they want to be able to read all of it. We use Canvas here as a platform, so I can post those scanned versions of those articles so that they can continue reading those if they want. The classes I teach biology. It's typically sophomores. It's the state required test. We cover all the different topics of biology. And with it being the end of course exam course, you feel that pressure of you have all this stuff to cover, but you also want to kind of keep it relevant and exciting and engaging. So I do try to bring in real world stories to help do that. Sometimes it's just a graphic. We've recently in Missouri added that you had to have a lot more, or we had to talk a lot more about evolution and cladograms and phylogenetic trees. And so I found this particular one last March or I guess two marches ago. 2020 was a blur. I don't really remember. But anyway, it's a nice little infographic, and it's not tying in with humans. And I find that the kids, a lot of times when we are looking at evolutionary history, it's sometimes better to go with a different species. Invasive species, there's lots of different examples of that you can tie in. Sometimes, you can find something maybe that's in your area. This one's not. I use this one to show that there's problems with invasive species all over the world. We've already talked zebra mussels in Missouri at this point. So then we can kind of go into and talk about, so just in general, look, it's a problem all over the place. Food webs, we talk about food webs before we talk about the abiotic side of things in biology. And then this particular article is a nice pairing of the two. So it ties in the nitrogen loving bacteria in with the food web. And it works really well as kind of a follow-up review of the food web part. Again, lots of different examples of human impact and the carbon cycle. There's lots of good little infographics again. So what I like is it doesn't have to be a really long article. I have some students in biology that are not at reading level, like reading on a 9th grade level. So sometimes those shorter articles really help them. Advanced biology is more of a taxonomy course for me. It's we really delve into invertebrates, and being in Southwest Missouri, like we're not around the ocean, but I love the ocean. The marine biology is kind of one of my passions. So being able to tie in to some of the different phyla that we don't have around here, or at least not common examples around here, and bring these in as discussion topics. I really like to be able to do that. I also use these articles to show, hey, look, we're ripping off nature. Like here's kind of a design that we're using, and we totally stole it from nature. So tying in current research. There's all kinds of things with insects. I know I've talked a lot, so I'm not going to really go through a lot of them. But again, short little, 5 sentences, but it's a good talking point for the day. The murder hornets was one of the big things of 2020, along with COVID and everything else. So, this is a current article that we could easily talk about with insects and such. Sometimes you can find some really good things to tie in with holidays. I love Halloween. So this is one of mine. I have a whole series really of during Halloween week. They walk in and they know it's going to be something creepy as far as bell work goes. So, hermit crabs are drawn to the dead, and we're talking about the crustaceans at that point. Or, hey, look, here's a spider eating a frog, something that maybe you didn't really picture. I also like that they do a little bit of vocab. So kleptopredation, we talk about what that means, and we talk about some examples. With dual credit, it's really everything that we've already covered. But these kids sometimes get the longer articles because, again, they're typically juniors and seniors. It is a college level class. And this particular article I just recently found, it's a 5-page article, one of the longer ones in Science News that I've recently used anyway. But it was something that could easily be scanned and posted during this world of virtual learning, because we've been half and half this year, half in person and then half virtual, and we alternate every other day. That's coming to an end, so I'm very excited about that. I'm glad to have all my kids back. So again, any kingdom, any particular phylum, you can find lots of different examples in it, tying two kingdoms together. So here's, a fungus article dealing with the animal kingdom. There's so many different examples that you can use, probably to find on any topic that you already talk about, to help kind of illustrate that. So I talked really fast. I was trying to keep it to a minimum. So I'm going to hand it off to our next presenter. And again, I'll stick around if you've got any questions. Hopefully you picked up at least one thing. So Brianna, I'll turn it over to you.
So my name is Brianna James. I am originally from Sunburst, Montana, which is a little tiny town 8 miles south of the border. I graduated with only 15 in my class. So it was a little bit of a culture shock when I started teaching in a town that had close to like 2,000 or more in the high school. But now my high school, current high school I teach at is Belgrade High School in Belgrade, Montana, and we have around 1,000. We're actually a little less than that right now. We are currently both remote and in person. So we're in person, but we have a few remote learners that we still post stuff for and stuff like that. So we still do both, even though we're a majority in person. It's my 12th year of teaching. I got my master's in curriculum and instruction, and I this December found out that I'm board certified. So woo, I was excited about that. And then my classes that I teach are earth science, anatomy and physiology, and physics. So I find a lot of different things with my broad range of topics that I teach. One little thing I wanted to kind of put in there, it's kind of interesting, is when I was in high school, I actually went to the International Science and Engineering Fair in 2004. And that's actually where I started hearing about science news, is as a result of that. For a year, I got science news, and I remembered getting that, and that's kind of why I wanted to get it into my classroom as well. So remembering that research and kind of going off of Karisa's stuff, that research stuff is so important, and it makes it so relevant in your classroom. Okay, so the things that I'm going to talk about, I have a substitute plan. I do infographics, and then just as like supplements to lesson plans, and I have examples of those. As far as easy substitute plans go, we have blocks of 90 minutes. So it wouldn't take up the whole class period, but it would be something that would be certainly helpful if you had an emergency. So what I have done is students pick an article, and they have a partner who picks another article, and they write 10 questions about their article, and then they swap their papers, the article included, and then they answer the other students' questions. So not only are they reading one article, they're reading two. The next thing that I do is infographics. So with an infographic, I give them a rubric, kind of a generic rubric, and they can use Google Drawings, Canva, paper, pencil. Most of my students this year have actually been picking paper, pencil. They're kind of sick of doing things online right now. So that's kind of, I guess, how this year is. But after they have done an infographic on an article that they've picked, there's a gallery walk, and they talk about it. And so it's a great discussion of more than one article on a specific topic. So we do oceans and sustainability in my earth science class. And they do a lab where they look at ocean acidification and how that affects shells. And then afterwards, they looked up articles that had to do with ocean acidification, and they had to pick something different than the people around them. And we ended up with a ton of great infographics. So I have some examples. Most of them, like I said, are hand-drawn. And I did make a requirement that they had to actually have more graphics on their papers, because the first time we did an infographic this year, it was more words and less pictures. And so they didn't quite get the concept yet. Here's another one. Okay, so as far as like lesson support, I've used a lot of the stuff from the educator resources that was pointed out at the beginning. I also do questions that I've written from an article that I find and I think is something that I want my students to read, but I want them to find specific points out of it. Like I want them to pay attention to specific details, or even look at the graphs and figure out what the graph is actually telling them. There's some examples on here. I haven't actually created the materials for these ones yet that I plan on using, but I'm going to be basing it off of the educator resources or the educator guides. Oh, sorry, my lights just went out. Sorry, still in my classroom. Lights shut off. So anyway, I am going to base what I do off of the educator guides, but I'm just going to use that as a starting point. And an example of one of the ones that I just did is when that solar storm preparedness article came out last week. This is right where we're at in earth science this year with how our schedule is. And so one of the things that I did was take it and I wrote some questions up and then I put an activity with it. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Firefox app, but the Firefox app, if you download it on your own or on your phone, it's free. And there's a bunch of different sensors in your phone and you can use those to detect different things. Like with the Notre Dame one, I might do some sound wave acoustics with the Firefox app. But for this one, I had them use the magnetometer and just using it to find different things that maybe a solar storm would affect. And then looking at the end at like what that would do and how that would matter to their life after having read the article and answered these questions. A couple other examples of things that I've looked at and that I might use as a supplement this year, just why are bat viruses so dangerous? The concussions one is a big one. I've had so many students have concussions this year and in the past years. And so they're very interested in stuff like that. And this one applies to both my physics and anatomy and physiology classes. So I think I could use it in both. So anyway, I know I kind of went fast, but that's the basics of what I have, and I'll be around for questions at the end as well. But I'm going to turn it over to the next presenter.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Karisa and Brianna. And I'm just going to share, we've heard some great ways already about how to use science news in the classroom. And I know that we probably are a little bio heavy. I saw from in the chat that we have chem and physics and earth science, definitely some biologists here. So there are wonderful, great resources other than bio and biomedical, but my focus is biotechnology and biomedical technology and biology. So again, just confirming you can see my slide.
Yep, we can see them.
Awesome. So like all of us, I am a product of my failures and successes in my life, and just wanted to share a little bit about myself. I was born in New York City and my family moved to Buffalo, and I was very involved in competitive swimming. So I actually graduated from high school in Toronto. And then from Toronto, I went to the University of Florida to attend college and also swim there. And it was a little tough situation for me. So I decided to transfer to the University of California in Berkeley, and then graduated there, and then came back to Pittsburgh after that and have settled here since then. So as you can see, I've kind of had this triangle. I've been at all four corners, or three corners anyway, and I hope in the next few years to learn a little bit more and visit more of the spots in the middle of the country. But why I'm sharing this is because in Pittsburgh, I loved science growing up. I had some, I never really had any mentors though. I don't really remember very much about my high school experience. I think I was a little waterlogged probably. And it really wasn't until I got to grad school, which I started when I came back east, that I really had my first best mentor. And I started as a master's student at the University of Pittsburgh in the School of Public Health. And then I kind of transferred over. I found research and I loved research. and I got my PhD in pharmacology in 1997. And I studied RAS signaling, which is signaling protein in cancer. And my real first mentor was my PhD mentor, Saeed Septi. And he really taught me how to question things and fail, and really spurred my drive for learning. And it wasn't until after about 18 years that I decided to become a high school teacher. So that was in 2009. And so you can kind of do the math and figure that I'm probably not as young as I might want to be. But after I got to a point in my research that I had 2 young children, my husband was also at the university, and I really worked with all the students coming through the lab and realized that I had never had those mentors. And if you're interested in science, especially in the medical field, everyone thinks it's just becoming a doctor, but it's not. There are so many opportunities out there today for in STEM. And so I decided how to become a high school teacher because I wanted to get to the students before they knew exactly what they were going to do. So I got my certification. And in 2009, this school called the Pittsburgh Science and Technology opened. And it is a magnet school, part of the urban district, the Pittsburgh Public Schools. And we have about, equal 50-50 African-American population, Caucasian, and which is representative of the Pittsburgh public school system. Students have to apply to get in. This is not a gifted school. If you get an extra ball in the lottery if you're on free and reduced lunch. Some of the cool things about our school is that in the 10th and 11th grade years, students pick their concentration, and they have 2 years of focus in one of the STEM areas. I teach the biomedical focused area. Students are also prepared to take the AP biology exam if they want to. We focus on environmental science, computer science, engineering, and we also have a capstone course similar to some the things that Karisa and Brianna talked about with promoting science fairs and everything like that. So again, the reason why I'm sharing this is because I think from my background, one of the things that I really love about science news is the real world application. And when a student asks me, why do I have to know this? Then I know that either I haven't done my job or I really haven't shown their relevance. So I wanted to highlight a few ways that you've already heard about some of the educator guides, to just give you an idea about what those educator guides are and how they can be used, some teachable moments, some just great overall resources and how to maybe use them or construct them, general relevance. And there's also an awesome program, a grant program. And I'm sure like you guys are tired after the long day, but maybe you can take away, 1 or 2 nuggets of information that you can then use in your classroom, either tomorrow or next week. So as your Pear Deck, I just kind of wanted to ask you for sure, just ask you if you could jot down, what do you want to gain from attending this type of webinar? Could you guys just, you could type it, you can write it if you have a pen. Okay, so I was hoping to see how to get my students to read and write more. All right, how others use the resource, some of the benefits of incorporating it. Yep, I learn everything every time I attend, especially a science news webinar. I learn something new to take with me. Biomedical, make it more interesting. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. A lot of good ideas. Okay, super. So the next question I have you ever used, or how often do you use science news resources? And this should be a multiple choice question. Okay, so we have a couple that say often, sometimes, maybe one time a month, rarely, or maybe. So we're kind of all over, but we definitely have more in the one-time use. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. And last but not least, I want to ask you, what knowledge do you want your students to take with them when they leave your classroom? So as a teacher, when you really think about what do you want your students to learn, what and take that knowledge, or take what do you want them to take away from your classroom? This could be, concept, it could be, let's see what. Fourth, they know how to think critically. Awesome. Basic research skills. Biology is interesting. Broad. There's always more to learn, right? Okay, English and science. Yes, writing, relevance, interest, why it's important. Think critically. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for sharing. Revises over time. Good. So similarly to you guys, when I really think, so I've been a teacher now for about 13 years also. When you think what do I want my students to take away when they leave? I think that I really want them to be lifelong learners. In reality, our students are not memorizing and remembering, specific things maybe about action potentials or even DNA or the transcription or translation process. But I want them to be able to be lifelong learners, like you said, ask questions, critically analyze data, use evidence to support a statement, so that English and science combination, and be scientifically literate. So I think we're kind of, I didn't hear one person, I didn't really see one person say anything about a specific concept. So I think this is where I really think that the integration of science news into my curriculum has the most impact. And so I'm going to just touch on these things a little bit. I know it's getting late and we're all a little tired. So what are the education guides? So the education guides are curriculum modules on specific topics. For those physics people and chemistry people that are out there, there are a wonderful amount of topics other than biomedical. So please do not get disappointed by the fact that you've heard a lot about bio. There are other great STEM field educator guides out there. What they really provide is they provide a scope and sequence. There are specific activities, and there are suggested relevant articles that are part of science news. Brianna talked about using some of these, in her curriculum as substitute plans. Karisa talked about using even articles as a warm-up. So the two that I'd like to share with you are, one is called Fatal Fix, and it's about the opioid crisis. And the other one is how I've integrated why bat viruses are so dangerous. And Brianna mentioned this one also. And again, there are many others out there. So it's just really important for you to take a look. So what might this look like? What might these science news resources look like in a whole module? So I have a class called Infectious Disease and Immunity. And one of the first things in that class is we talk about virus structure. We also don't have a textbook, as Karisa mentioned, and we our school has been 100% remote since last spring. So we've been doing this all virtually. We are a one-to-one laptop school, so students have their laptops. But one of the things that Science News has is called explainers. And an explainer is a short article to explain basic concepts. They're really great if you don't have a textbook, and they're written very, very well so that they're clear for students. There are some links to define words, and there's often a vocabulary list. So a great resource for most concepts, that I've encountered is, these explainers. So one thing that I might do in addition to a lecture, in addition to a modeling activity, is, using these explainers. And this is what is a virus. We watched the movie Contagion, and obviously everything that's going on with COVID. How do viruses jump a host? And so, we've had students create models based on, like digital models and drawings. We saw Karisa, Brianna, that those drawings were great, but having students draw like a model. I use also some NIH curriculum supplements. They're a little bit old, but they're awesome. If you haven't used them, I highly encourage you to check them out. And then also for viruses, there's a great module from Hudson Alpha about doing some bioinformatics, but then using this educator guide to understand this process of how viruses jump to a new host. And this would be great for, has been excellent for COVID, Ebola, so many different things. Science News also has wonderful resources related to COVID. And in this educator guide, they'll have three or four suggested activities. They'll have at least two articles with different readability scores. So it's very nicely differentiated. There are worksheets provided. You can adapt these to Google Docs or Schoology, which we use. And they usually promote group work and also can be used as a culminating project. So depending on the educator guide that you use, there are really a wonderful set of resources. Another one that I have used is in the nervous system. So, and in my signaling class, would be appropriate for A&P, definitely AP biology, although I know it's not on, the nervous system isn't on the exam anymore, but for signaling. So again, we kind of go over the nervous system anatomy, and students create their models. And I use some NIH curriculum about studying, how drugs affect synaptic transmission. And even today, even though we've made some improvements in the opioid crisis, we definitely still aren't there, but this Fatal Fix educator guide really helps students understand what opioids are. There's an article, they look up data, and they use that data to really understand. So they're critically analyzing data and trying to make meaning out of it. Again, a lot of the digital resources, I have some of the links that you could take a look at or share. Again, this is an article. It's almost like more of like an animated article. Again, students can research articles on their own. The educator guide provides a lot of details and a lot of resources to give you a start, or so that you really don't have to do the work. This is an example of a slide deck that, so in the Fatal Fix educator guide, students research 7 or 8 different highlighted topics, major topics for the opioid crisis. I have been using, our school uses Teams. I've been breaking them up into rooms. I supplied the articles because I wanted to guide the students. These are all Science News articles, and then kind of give them some ideas, what they need to do. So this slide deck is also available if you're interested. Another great thing that I love, and that you've already heard about, these teachable moments. Again, this is the immune system, a module on the immune system, using the explainer again. What are antibodies? I usually create a Schoology assessment, a few questions based on the explainer. These are also available for you if you're interested. But even more importantly, the relevant articles with data. So here's an article where we're talking about B cells and, students understanding that B cells make antibodies, and the ability, if some of you may use Pogles also. So here's a really relevant article about people, who either have already had COVID or might only need 1 booster shot. And this is an example where I created kind of this activity for students to analyze data. This is real world data. This is supplied in the Science News article. It complements something we learned about in our Pogles. And there's also access to the real article, which is really awesome. There are links in the Science News article to the real article. So if you're interested in data and real world application, Science News is the way to go. In case you haven't heard about it, I don't, some of you may know of Wakelet boards. So, you know, we can provide resources to students, but a Wakelet board creates a more visual, pleasing way. That one of the things Wakelet boards does is you can, you know, add resources to a page. I use, you know, again, here's, I had students researching last spring about COVID. I also use the Scientist magazine, which is not related, you know, to Science News, but also focused on life science. Another great resource, but you can add resources to a page. So instead of just giving students links, you can allow them to look at the pictures and find relevance and kind of do their own research. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that. Some of you biologists may have heard about the DNA Day essay contest. And in fact, the deadline was just recently, last week, and the discussion or the prompt was about the diversity in genomic research and how it's not very diverse. The day after the deadline, Science News came out with this article, DNA databases are too white, so genetics doesn't help anyone. Great resource. We read the article in class as a popcorn read. There was an attached video that complements the article. Really awesome to connect, you know, what the students are doing in the classroom in the area of genome and genomics.